So, we are going to be reviewing Rings of Power. Rings of Power is the show on Amazon Prime. It is a show based off of the work of J.R.R. Tolkien. This is set thousands of years before the events of which you see in The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. It's mostly covering kind of the age of like the major events of like the Middle Earth Second Age, the forging of the actual the rings themselves, and you also see the rise of Sauron, who is the Dark Lord there, that kind of is the big evil that looms over this entire series. Some major characters that you follow in this series, some characters that you might know from the Lord of the Rings, or if you've seen that, or The Hobbit, or read any of those books, or people like Morfydd Clark, who plays Galadriel. You also have Robert Armayo, who plays Elrond. They're pretty much the mostly kind of familiar characters you'll know from the past works there that you've probably seen of like Lord of the Rings and other Tolkien work. And they're also kind of major characters you follow throughout the story, along with some other characters like the Hartfoots here that you see, who also get accompanied by a man who is the Stranger, that you kind of see, who looks like basically a really, really tall, jacked, homeless man. You also see them following another elf who is a warrior elf here, who has a bow and arrow, who he's with kind of a town of regular humans that you also kind of follow here. Now, we came in and we talked about this series, the first 2 episodes. We reviewed it. It's up on the channel now. Sage wasn't too hot on the series. He just, correct me if I'm wrong, but you just thought it was just, the first 2 episodes were just kind of meh. Not really terrible, not great, just meh. Okay.
Yeah, I remember thinking better than I expected, but worse than I would have hoped.
Okay. And me, I was kind of like, I liked certain elements of it. I liked kind of Morfydd Clark. I liked her as Galadriel. That seemed kind of interesting to see where that would go. I did kind of see, and I thought also the show was gorgeous. I thought, because this show was $500 million that Amazon put in this show. So this is also considered one of the most expensive shows ever made, which that means it has a lot of pressure on it to be successful. And I mean, I said it when I reviewed the first 2 episodes. The money's there. You can see the money. It's definitely in the look of the show. Even in comparing it to, and it seems like a lot of people want to compare it to the other fantasy show that's on TV right now, House of the Dragon. I guess because they're just the 2 big fantasy properties that are out right now. And House of the Dragon, Game of Thrones, when that show was on, they looked good. They did. Game of Thrones, and that was when they did like the Battle of the Bastards, when you see the dragons, when you see a lot of that stuff, they put a lot of money into that show as well. And you see a lot more dragons in something like House of the Dragons. And that looks good as well. But this show, I'd said it before, and I finishing it now. I was like, yeah, I still think it's the best looking streaming show I've ever seen. I think, and you could definitely tell the money is there. When it comes to a lot of the characters and story, for me, the first 2 episodes, I thought that was a bit lacking. So now, having finished it, all 8 episodes that it has, we're gonna give our complete thoughts on it, and then it's also going to be a spoiler review for it. So, Sage, now having seen all 8 episodes, what is your opinion of Rings of Power?
Well, let me just start with, I worked very hard to kind of shut my attachment to any of the rest of the things that this is based on away, and really try to view it as its own thing. And to be honest, I kind of feel the same way I felt after those first 2 episodes. I think that it never really finds its footing in terms of its script, its pacing, its characters. I never found a real reason to attach myself to any of them. And yet, I don't think it is so bad that it is just this, absolute mess of a, hunk of garbage. I don't think it ever hit that either. And yeah, I'm left with this very just, I really feel bored through most of it. I mean, I'll tell you, there was at least once where I did fall asleep and I had to rewind a little bit to catch what I missed, and then I felt like I didn't miss anything when I went back. I do think that in a lot of places it looks really good, but and I talk about this if we talk about something that's old and it's kind of lulled by the standards of special effects by today's standards. If the art direction was great then, it holds up better now. And looking at this, it makes me feel like the money's there to make it look good, but I don't feel like there's really good art direction behind the effects. I think it's a lot of pretty on something very plain. I never. There's a few places where I thought, oh, that looks impressive. When you see Numenor the first time, I thought that was a very cool, these wide shots.
Mhm.
But at the same time, you get there, you spend time there, and it feels really small. Still, as big as the budget is, it feels like there's not that many people there. There's not that many extras making up the crowd. It kind of still felt small in many ways, despite being really, really pretty and visually impressive in others.
Mm.
And then I will say a lot of the armor looked like came out of a 3D printer. Like there's spots to me where the effects and how the money didn't feel like it was there 100% of the time for me.
Mm. Yeah, I got a shot up of Gladriel in armor right here. Some of the other soldiers that you see here, kind of when she's in her
Now,
armor.
her armor, I didn't think looked terrible, but the Numenor, the kind of the scale armor
Uh-huh.
that you see, that looked really cheap to me. That looked like, hey, we got to put money into this other thing, and that there were times when certain things felt like just there wasn't a lot of work to put into them.
Mm. There was a scene where people saw where there's a scene. I don't know if you remember, but it's where the character like the Andron character, is that how you pronounce his name? The elf with the bow and arrow, Andron. Um,
Oh, Arondir, I believe.
okay, Arondir. Like his partner was like speaking into a crowd of people, and people saw that they kind of copied and pasted a lot of faces in the crowd and things like that, which is typical of what you would do
Yeah.
with a crowd shot. Like you can go to any movie and see like a crowd shot, and you're
Oh
gonna
yeah.
see
Oh yeah.
copy and paste and things like that in it to save money on the budget and things like hiring all these different people and all that different stuff.
Sure.
So you kind of see stuff like that. So I kind of get what you're saying. It is very pretty looking. Some of the places, some of the scenes, I get your kind of feeling like some of the art direction of it may be lacking. I do think there were some great shots in here, like the towards I think it was episode, if I remember correctly, 7 or so, 6 or 7, where they do where was the fire where they get rained down upon, and then everything is just this amber color.
That
Um,
looked good.
I thought that looked pretty
That looked
nice.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
No,
uh,
I totally agree. There are places where it totally comes through and it shows. That's a very good example.
Yeah. I thought that looked
Yeah.
really nice. So I kind of understand. I mean, because I think when people watch the first 2 episodes, a lot of the takeaways was really good looking, but not a lot to get you invested in characters. Um,
Yeah.
and watching it after the first 2 episodes, and I got a little bit even of that criticism watching the first 2 episodes, even though I did like Gadriel. Watching it further, I was like, yeah, I kind of get that feeling too. I think it doesn't really kind of pick up for me character wise until episode maybe 6, or 7, 6, yeah, maybe 6, episode 6. It doesn't really pick up for me because I just feel like that's where there's more momentum. That's where things are really kind of
Yeah.
coming together. I think is that, and I think for me one of the best storylines going on here, because like I said before, so it's kind of like 4 major storylines kind of going on here, all being told simultaneously, and eventually towards the end of it, some of them kind of come together. One of them, the storylines, is with Gladriel, who's she's seeking revenge on Sauron for killing her brother. Um, Then you have the storyline with Elrond and the dwarves, which I think for me that's the best one, hands down. I think that one with him and Durin, I think that's kind of the best one. I kind of like their whole bromance together. I kind of like getting insight of the dwarves and the kind of their culture and kind of what they do. I like Doran's wife in it. I think she's really good. And how, like, he's very displeased with his father, who's the king, and whether or not he should help the elves. I think all that stuff to me is really good. Then you have the storyline with the what was the elf's name? You said Android, Andor,
I believe it's pronounced Arondir.
Arondir, that elf. Um, for me, I think, I don't know. I think that was, maybe if I had to pick a weaker one, it was either that one or the Hartfoots one. To me, was the weaker one for me,
Yeah.
of the series. I just wasn't that all that invested in, like, the town, and then he was in a relationship with this human woman. It's like, I don't really know who this human woman is to you, or all that stuff. I wasn't as invested in that. The stuff with the Hartfoots and them, where these younger Hartfoots meet this stranger character, who they meet him and try to help him along the way. Some of that stuff was okay. I thought a little bit of it was, kind of just like, oh, look, kind of scared of him. Because there would be times where that character would act erratic. But I mean, there was a scene where I think it was in the seventh episode where, like, they ask him, like, "Hey, could you, like, fix this tree? Could you do, maybe use some of your magic to do that?" And then, like an idiot, this girl walks in front of the tree while the branch is falling, and,
Yep.
like, they all looking at him like he's a monster. Like, oh my god, what did I do? It's like, your dumb ass stepped in front of the tree. Like, what? Like, why are you blaming him? So I thought that was
There
some of that
was
stuff.
two moments like that, I thought.
What was the other moment for you?
The other one was, it was, I believe it was in the direct previous episode. He bruises his arm, saving them from the warg creatures, and then he's healing it. He's icing it, and he's sitting there, and she's watching ice like magically come up his arm, and then she sticks her hand in it, and then when it explodes and like knocks her back, she acts terrified of him. Right, like, oh, she
Oh
finally
yeah.
sees the danger he represents that everyone's been warning her about. And I'm like, she stuck her hand in the magic ice that he was already making. Like, I just, yeah.
That to me was just, that was just kind of, really weird to me how they did that. For you, what was the strongest storyline for you, and what was the weakest one?
Well, so I do agree that I think Elrond and Durin is the strongest in the show. There is actual character conflict that doesn't feel manufactured there. A friend you haven't seen in a long time that you haven't paid the mind to. That's a totally normal human reaction to be upset about that and have feelings about of abandonment even about that. There's an actual core to the characters interacting with each other that I honestly don't feel is present anywhere else in the show. Um, I will. So here's the one place where I can't totally let go of the Lord of the Rings and the source material, because they created a scenario in which, and we are doing full spoilers, right? I just want to make sure before I say it.
Yeah.
Okay, so they create this story with the Mithril where it is tied to the elf's life force. Elrond needs to convince Durin and his father to allow them access to it. Durin digs. His father shuts it down, and covers it up,
Mm,
and that appears to have awoken the Balrog.
right.
Um, Now, there's a very, very simple story in the Lord of the Rings to that. It's the dwarves as a society were greedy, and because of their greed, basically divine punishment was kind of cast upon them. And the way that that happened in the show, it felt like Amazon saw that and went, we can't tell a story where like we point out that greed's a bad thing, right? Like take that out. We gotta like he's like altruistically trying to help people, and that's what wakes the Balrog up. That's the bad thing to do. We gotta eliminate the greed is bad part of this, and so that because it's not just changing details, and you can change details in an adaptation, but that's taking the core theme of something and just ripping it out, and I feel like that's kind of all over the show. But that, and as much as I do think that's the strongest story, that is a big thing that kind of pulls it back down for me.
Mm.
As far as the worst, I think the Harfoots. I think the Harfoots were the worst overall. Although I believe his name is Lenny Henry as the older actor.
Mm.
He, I think, is he's maybe the one actor that brought a sense of whimsy to that environment. At least for the Harfoots, I think he stood out better than everybody else in that particular storyline. But I just I don't know. With the hobbits in, say, The Lord of the Rings, I never wanted to spend like 4 hours on just that. Like I was like, I got my 20 minutes and I'm good. Let's go, let's go do something else. But just going back to it over and over, and it never really evolves. It never really goes. Like, say what you will about, Galadriel's story. She goes to different places and she in different environments and
Mm.
interacts with different characters over the course of the story. Whether I say think that's good or not, the way it's done is a different conversation. I feel like the Harfoots really don't go anywhere. It's like they're running in place the whole time.
Yeah. It feels like really the whole purpose of the Hardfoots is just for the character of the stranger. It's just for the wizard, basically. I mean, that's
Yeah,
that's basically kind of just what they're there for. Who I guess
definitely.
it's what everybody guessed. I mean, he's who everybody guessed he was. Gandalf, I guess he is who everybody pretty much assumed he was. And
Yeah, I mean they still don't completely confirm for sure. It's very strongly hinted at, and so I do think there's a very good chance that he is, if nothing else, than for marketing's sake, because Gandalf's a well-known character.
mhm.
But one thing in the lore is that there are two blue wizards that are written to have shown up during the Second Age earlier than the others, and it could theoretically be one of these other wizards because it still is a wizard. So I don't know how they're going to do that exactly. It seems all signs do point to Gandalf with them.
Yeah. So, yeah, like I said, all signs kind of do point to him. I mean, it's not like I said officially confirmed, but there's just strong hints towards it.
Mhm.
They do in the show, like certain lines he says in it that Gandalf says in the
Yep.
movies. So yeah, I think that's kind of what that was all set up for. The actors I think playing the Hartfoot, I don't think they're bad. I think the older actor you mentioned, who's the leader of the Hartfoots, I think he does a pretty good job. The two younger actors, who are the ones that first meet the stranger, I think a lot of the show, I don't know if you agree with it, but a lot of the show kind of feels like it's trying to hit the same beats as the movies and have the same kind of similar kind of character types. Where I think the Hartfoots with
Mhm.
the two leads of those, it felt kind of like the Sam and Frodo relationship. Then with Galadriel, when she meets Halbrand, it feels like he's like Aragorn. Then when Elrond and Durin, it feels like Legolas and Gimli. Like, do you think that they were trying to like have similar like character types and relationships throughout the show to make people reminisce about Lord of the Rings, the books and the movies and things like that?
I absolutely do. I think that's 100% an accurate reading of the whole show, to be honest. And I guess this is where I maybe really start to come in and be more negative about it. I thought the whole thing felt like member berries all over the place, really just trying to call back to things that I've either seen or I had an explanation for, or maybe I just wasn't asking that question because it wasn't that complicated. I feel like the Harfoot's entire storyline we just said is just kind of, here's a story giving you an explanation for why Gandalf likes hobbits. Galadriel's feels like here's an explanation for why there's a last alliance of men and elves to fight Sauron. The dwarf and Elrond storyline feels like, well, here's just a storyline to show you how the Balrog woke up to be there in Lord of the Rings. I felt like the whole show, it almost felt like the Star Wars prequels to me because I've described those movies as making a galaxy feel like a neighborhood. Take the scope of this big, big fictional universe and kind of, interlock every little character so that they've come across each other before or someone related to them somehow. And it really it feel like it was actively reducing the scope of what the Lord of the Rings is capable of instead of going, we're in the time period the show is attempting to take place in is a much more kind of over the top magical time period, much more creatures, much more wild things happening than in the Lord of the Rings story. And I feel like it reduced the scope of what the universe is, and it did not expand it.
Hmm. Interesting. Didn't reduce it. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm not as big of a fan as you are of this universe, and the big thing about this series, what a lot of people were worried about, is that it's not taking from the expanded material that is the Silmarillion. The only thing they could do
Mm-hmm.
is basically base it off the appendixes that came from at the end of the Lord of the Rings, where they have the title stuff at the
Yep.
very end, the after kind of credits there. That's the only thing they could do because they don't have the rights to the Silmarillion. They only have the rights to the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. Amazon does.
And I'll be honest, they didn't really use a lot of the stuff in those appendices. They really kind of ignored that for the most part too.
Mm. Yeah. So that's kind of yeah. So they were just kind of going, a lot of just making stuff up, basically. You know what I mean? For the story, just to fill in a lot of major gaps there, and that's what kind of people were kind of really worried about with this show. So for me, I've read the books a long time ago, and I've seen the movies. It did kind of have that feeling of like you're really trying to hit those same beats and points as you did in the material there, but none of it has that same, I don't think, emotional weight to it as you had in the movies or in the books. There were some decent things in here. Like I said, I like the relationship that Elrond had with Durin, and I like Durin and his wife Disa. I think they had a great back and forth. That was fun to watch. The stuff with Gladriel, like you said, at least she kind of moves on to kind of different places. Like her going to Numenor was interesting, and then meeting the queen of it was interesting, and her trying to assemble this army to help was kind of interesting, and how that turned out to be a massive kind of colossal failure. I thought was also kind of interesting. I kind of like how that turned out, where they kind of got ambushed and they got rained upon with kind of these fire and everything like that. I liked that. I was like, I didn't expect them to take kind of that big of an L, honestly, in a show like this, honestly, and then to see the aftermath of the battle, and people are missing limbs and blood everywhere, and everything's on fire and everything's covered in ash, and the queen of Numenor ends up being blind. I was just kind of like, wow, I didn't expect it to kind of go there. I mean, what did you think about that stuff? Kind of with Galadriel, Numenor, kind of, even Hellbrand, bring him in there. What did you think about all that art stuff?
Well, okay, so I do agree that there's an edge that storyline has because there is more plot momentum. Like some things actually do happen versus like the Harfoots where it's just kind of mostly nothing the whole time. But I never felt like the character work ever really clicked for me so that when you get to these big moments where the gears start to shift and turn, things start to really happen, i I didn't I couldn't really bring myself to care all that much about what was going on because I never felt like the groundwork for the characters going into that plot momentum worked. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing is if I don't care about the characters when nothing's happening, I'm not as invested when the big plot points do start to come. And I just don't think they earned a emotional tether really. Some of that stuff was impressive. I thought the actual volcanic eruption, I thought that was a very cool sequence. I enjoyed that quite a bit. But even amongst those episodes, there were still things like I like the queen being blind. There was something just a little silly about it because they stop and she tells Urendil, the captain of the guard, just keep going or don't want anyone to know, don't want anyone to panic. Next scene, they cut to her and she's wearing a giant blindfold, and I'm like, all right, I think people might be able to figure it out based on that.
Mm, I don't know. Maybe she'll convince people that's her night mask. Maybe when she goes to sleep. Maybe. Uh.
Perhaps. Um,
Hmm.
yeah. As for bringing Halbrand into things, I don't know if you want to get into that yet, but
Yeah. Did you see?
I
I mean, did you see it coming? Or
in episode 2, his like one of his first lines of dialogue is appearances can be deceiving. Wink, wink. I was pretty sure it was him.
Mm,
Almost the first scene within that episode, I was convinced it was him.
yeah. And then Hellbrand turns out to be he is Sauron. He is him.
Yep.
It turns out to be. Um. Hmm. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of heavily foreshadowed. I mean, with that line that you said with him in there. I mean, did you? I mean, did you like the actor's performance as Hellbrand slash Sauron? Or-
I it's a thing. I said it during when we were talking about just the first 2 episodes before. I don't want to judge any of these actors because for the most part, I just don't care for the script, and so I don't want to come down too hard on any of them. That being said, I don't think he was bad, but I did find him kind of boring. Like many things in the show, I don't think he had a a big presence to him as an actor. He didn't fill the room, and I'm sure there was I'm sure that was a conscious choice in some sense because they're trying to they don't want the audience to know right away, even though I had kind of guessed at least. Uh, I I I don't love what they did with him. I think I honestly I think they tried to almost humanize him too much.
Hmm. I mean, interesting. I mean, kind of what they did. I mean, he kind of played the game pretty nice, pretty manipulative in a sense, in a way. There, deceiving. You know.
I don't know. I feel like he didn't do a whole lot of it deceiving. I mean, when Galadriel meets him, he says, "This isn't mine. I found it on a dead man. I don't want to go there. I don't want to do that. I don't want to, I don't want to participate. I just want to forage. Leave me alone." And every step of the way, it's her. But it's not. It doesn't feel like it's he's incepting an idea in her mind to do these things. It feels like she's just doing these things. And Sauron, it almost makes it feel like Sauron would have been happy to just kind of fuck off and be alone. And then if it weren't for Galadriel, he wouldn't have even gone back to being evil at all. Like the way that it was written, maybe there's more expansion to be done there. Have some mental influence on her having all those ideas. But I think at just the first season as it is, it feels like Sauron got dragged along on a journey he had no interest in, and
Mm,
that turned him back to the dark path that he had like quit.
mm,
And I just don't think that fits. I just don't think that fits. It's like they want Sauron, and I did see earlier today. I just saw an interview with the showrunners themselves comparing Sauron to Walter White and Tony Soprano,
mm.
and I just I don't know. I don't think we should be looking to crime dramas for how to write Lord of the Rings characters. I just don't think that those two things work together.
Mm. I mean, so they were trying to create like with comparing like Walter White, Tony Smith. They were trying to create like an anti-hero, like almost like like this kind of figure there.
Yeah, like a anti-hero, anti-villain, someone who's bad but like in a complicated way.
Hmm.
I
Huh.
mean,
That.
look, you can call it simplistic, but I think that part of the simplistic morality in the fantasy story that is the Lord of the Rings is part of its inherent nature and what it makes it work. I'm not saying you can't have any morally gray situations come up. It's not like nothing in Lord of the Rings is like that, but there is you know, again, call it simplistic if you want, but there is a simplistic hero's journey, and black and white morality to that world. And I just don't think it gains anything from being interpreted in this, more modern, let's have our bad guys be understandable kind of sensibility. I just don't think it just doesn't need to be applied, I don't think, to
Hmm.
a fantasy universe that is like this. You could look at Game of Thrones, that's all they do, right? Everyone is either terrible or like at best in the middle in that stuff. But
Yeah.
I don't know. It feels like it takes away from the identity of Lord of the Rings. It makes the show feel like this is one of the many fantasy shows that has based itself off of Lord of the Rings and then fallen into obscurity because it didn't have a brand name to survive off of. It feels like it could be any one of those.
Mm. Interesting. And you bring up, bringing up Game of Thrones. And I was listening to somebody. I was listening to another YouTuber. Name is Jessie Gender. And she was talking and she was comparing
Okay.
Rings of Power. She was comparing and House of the Dragon, and she was saying like, you know. There's just two different shows, and you have House of the Dragon, which, like you said, is very morally gray, and it's hard to really well, I don't know. Some people love certain people, even though they are terrible people and they do bad things. But it's a lot of morally gray situations, and you root for people one minute. You'll root for a guy that will kill people and chop their dicks off and tongues and stuff like that. But then he'll do something really cool the next episode, and you're like, okay, I like this guy. But in something like Lord of the
Yeah.
Rings, you have the fantasy where it is more hopeful instead of kind of a depressing world that is
Mm-hmm.
House of the Dragons that you kind of look to, and everything like that. You know what I mean, and be inspired by. I think of the beauty in the world,
Yeah.
and I think that's kind of some of the differences there of that you have between like a maybe like a Lord of the Rings and like a Game of Thrones type world. Did you like the action of Rings of Power?
I can't say I did. I got to be honest. I felt like when anytime they really wanted it to feel big and epic, I again except for I do think the volcano itself, that eruption, I think that looked really great. But I just don't think anything like the episode 6 was basically one big battle. I just didn't find it that impressive. I mean, first of all, I didn't care about the people of the Southlands. There was nothing like we didn't explore their culture and like what this society was like at all. It just felt very this is just a group of people to be there to get rid of, so we don't need to put a lot of work into what this place is like. It felt very small. It didn't feel like a big world, kind of like I was saying earlier, how it felt like it reduced the scope. Um, and then I think especially when Numenor comes in, I just I don't think they're particularly impressive looking. I mean, there were like maybe five boats. They had like five boats they came on. There's like 20 people a boat. It looked like in the again, I don't want to keep going back to the lore and the other parts of the franchise, but Numenor is meant to be essentially the greatest human civilization to have ever existed in terms of military power, just every kind of way. And they didn't feel like there were even as many people as the poorer kingdom Rohan in the Lord of the Rings, the smaller kingdom that was like that they were supposed to be the tiny one in comparison to Gondor in the last movie. And I didn't think Numenor, the greatest of all of historical civilizations, felt smaller than that to me.
Mm,
And so when they come to blows, they come to the battle. I just am like, it just doesn't look like there's that many people here. It looks like a skirmish,
mm,
I would say, more than a war.
mm. Well, didn't because when she was talking to the Queen of Numenor, Gladriel, wasn't it that the Queen just said like, okay, well, I'm just gonna give you like a few ships and some soldier, like didn't wasn't that the deal? If I'm remembering that correctly, right? I'm just gonna give you like a few ships.
Now, that she may have said that. I don't remember exactly, but I'll tell you that the music was trying to make me feel like there were a lot more people, and it was a lot more impressive than it actually was.
Mm. Uh,
There's a sense of tone that they're creating into those scenes that just it feels like it's just if you close your eyes and you just listen to it, I'd think that there was something far grander happening on screen. And so maybe that's a criticism of the music even for being tonally inconsistent with what I'm seeing.
mm.
But it just felt like they wanted you to be more amped up about it. And I just kept thinking this just feels small.
For me, I thought the action, I thought it was fine. I mean, I didn't think it was particularly that breathtaking or that like, man. I mean, it wasn't like again. I don't want to keep going back to Game of Thrones, but you did have moments like in Game of the like Battle of the Bastards or something like that, right? That was like, damn, like this is awesome. This is great. You know what I mean? And that also has a lot to do with by that point, because that was in season six, season seven, I
Yeah,
think.
that was pretty far into the show.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
you already are have like a heavy investment of like what's kind of gonna go on, and that has also a lot to do with it too. And like you said, the people of the Southlands, I was kind of like, I'm not too much. I don't really know too much about them. And then this elf and him having this relationship with this human woman, it's supposed to be like the big, controversy, forbidden love, and everything. Like, I'm
Mhm.
not into it all that much. I mean, I know the people of this town. They sure hate some elves. They hate themselves some elves. I know that. I know that much. But yeah, I mean, I kind of was like, yeah, I'm not that much into it. Some of the stuff I thought, like when the elf gets imprisoned by the orcs, and then you have like the elf leader who got corrupted, who kind of looked like Lee Pace to me. Like every time I looked at him, I was like, he kind of looked like Lee Pace.
I can see that. I
Um,
can see that.
I actually thought he was kind of cool. I actually kind of thought like he actually kind of had some good stuff kind of going on with him. And actually, funny enough, he was also in Game of Thrones. He was Benjen Stark. Funny enough, like yeah, he was.
Oh, okay, okay. I thought I recognized him, but I couldn't place it. But
Uh,
that okay, that makes sense.
who was the brother of Eddard Stark in Game of Thrones. So yeah, yeah, he was there.
Yeah,
I actually kind of thought he was actually kind of cool. Little stuff they did. Um, uh, what would you think about his character and kind of him being the leader of the orcs and everything like that? What would you think about him?
I actually thought that was interesting. I wish he'd been in it more. I wish more time had been spent on that. Actually, I thought that I almost had forgotten about that character, but I did think he was one of the more interesting elements that they brought in. But I feel like they underserved one of their best ideas by only having it present for. I mean, he's got the one conversation with the Rondir, and then like he's in like the episodes like 5 and 6 quite a bit, and then he's kind of gone again for the last two. But I don't know. I thought that actor was good. I thought the idea of the character, the concept of the character, and yeah, I'll tell you what, that's something that actually does line up with the lore, and the kind of greater mythos of the universe. That's something that does line up really well.
Mm,
And of course that ends up being one of the best elements of it.
yeah. And I did like his back and forth between him and Gladriel. I did like that when she's coming in. I kind of did like that. a little bit. You were talking about the music before. Did you like the music in it?
I didn't think it was necessarily bad, but I did find it forgettable. I didn't think it had a particularly, which is funny because the I believe the composer is Bear McCreary, and there's a lot of stuff that he's done things like the Last God of War game, uh, shows like Black Sails. He's done a lot of stuff, and I usually notice his name and like a lot of the music I hear, but I don't know, I felt like it was serviceable, but not memorable. I don't think I'll ever catch myself humming that like I do Howard Shore's score for the Lord of the Rings movies. I don't think I'd ever go out of my way to listen to that music on its own.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah, yeah, it was decent. I thought the opening intro music was pretty good. Um, I wouldn't
I
say.
liked that probably the most.
Mm, yeah, I wouldn't say it's particularly that memorable. Like I couldn't probably hum it right now, but listening to it, I was going, that's pretty good. It's pretty decent music. I thought. Uh,
It's totally competent, totally competent.
yeah, I guess that's the definition of the show. I guess pretty much just competent. I guess. Would you say?
Well, I'd go a little lower. I'd go a little lower, to be honest.
No.
I think there are parts of it that are. I do think there's moments where I'm sitting there watching and I think, oh, you almost got something. You almost got something. But every time that happened, I watched it slip right through my fingers like sand. I think if this wasn't the most expensive show ever made, this was just another show, I would say, yeah, I didn't think it was that great, whatever. But the fact that this is like the most expensive TV show ever made, and it was, I just didn't feel like it had a soul. I just didn't think there was a real soul to it. And it's like and I say this, Tolkien himself he would not have liked the movie trilogy of the Lord of the Rings. I can tell you that. He hated commercial entertainment. He wouldn't have liked those movies either. But I think he would have really disliked what they've done with this because it feels really corporately produced to just elicit nostalgia. I feel it's like the same bone I have to pick with like J.J. Abrams Star Wars movies where I'm like, can you do something new instead of reminding me of things that I have already seen? Can we please move on to something that isn't recognizable?
Mm,
And with the way they handled Sauron, it felt like that J.J. Abrams kind of mystery box
mm,
storytelling technique that I was a fan of Lost when it was first on, and I was not pleased with how it continued. And I feel like that's every time that concept, not necessarily J.J. Abrams himself, but every time that concept gets used, it's all about crafting a mystery. Let's make a mystery, and then there's so much effort put into coming up with a question that the answer gets forgotten about and slapped together at the whole. It just never feels satisfying.
mm. Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying. About it. I'm probably going to be a little bit more favorable than you. I think I liked a little bit more stuff than you with this series, but yeah, I could say I'm not in love with it. But if they do a season two, I think it's likely it's going to get a season two. I think they said it is. I think it's likely. Or I read
Uh,
some.
I believe when they actually acquired the license in the first place, it was done. The contract was signed with the stipulation that they had to produce 5 seasons. Like they're like right out of the gate,
Oh,
five
okay.
season commitment.
Yeah. So okay. So it's getting one either way. So it's pretty much getting one either way. Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Unless like the viewership numbers were like an abysmal failure, and they had to like go back and go, all right, we're like hemorrhaging, we need to think like that's the only way that more wouldn't get made. Even if it does just okay, it's absolutely getting at least three of those 5 seasons. Sure.
Hmm. And is there anything they could do in the next season to maybe try to win you over a little bit more?
Um, I honestly, I don't think there's any saving this for me personally. Now, there's, there might be a whole bunch of people out there that they could make some turns and some choices that would totally put it back together, this could totally be a super popular show going forward. I think for I've tried to evaluate it very hard on its own terms without comparing it to to other elements too hard. But for me personally, for my enjoyment, I just think they've made too many diversions from the source material, and made it unable to show and get to too many storylines that I just find more interesting than what they are doing. Um, and like I'd like to say something more positive, but I'll tell you the one thing that could get me interested in watching the season two is if it got worse. I'm not gonna lie. I love unintentionally funny things. If things are the right kind of bad, I almost like them more than watching something good. The best thing this show could do to appeal to me personally
Mm-hmm.
would be get worse, because then maybe it would be funny.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um. hmm. So what rating would you give it? What would be the rating?
I would give it a I'd give it a skip it.
Skip it.
I would say skip it. Yeah, like I said, I think that there's totally a bunch of people out there this could appeal to, and I think that's great. Like I never, whether whatever I feel about something, like I never want to take it away from anybody else if they're enjoying it. But I just there is just like there's little things I can point to and say that was done well, or this was all right, or they were onto something here, but it never comes together enough for me. Not enough to get me to want to watch more.
Mm. Mm. Okay. So for me, yeah, I guess I'm a little bit more favorable than you. I'm gonna give it a stream it. Kind of middle to little close to higher tier stream it. I mean, maybe give it a chance, see how you like it, watch it. I mean, these are each episode is over like almost over an hour long each episode, so it's a little bit of a commitment to see it, even though it's 8 episodes, and to kind of watch them. And I think it's not going to be a quick binge. I don't think. I think sometimes these episodes do drag a little bit,
Mm-mm.
and sometimes pacing is an issue in some of these episodes. Um, but yeah, I mean, just to see, if you like it or not, if it's your thing. I have heard people who really do love it, and it's their thing. I don't know. Maybe that will be you. I don't know if you're listening to this. But yeah, that would be just my thoughts. I just thought it was just okay for me. Am I excited to see a season two? Uh, Not really. I'm not over the moon to see a season two. I mean, especially when you have a lot of other great things on TV. And this year, I think the big competition this year was like, okay, this year was also House of the Dragon. It was also Andor that was out. I do love Andor. I think Andor is great. From I watched the first episode, the first two, no, 3 episodes that they dropped, and I thought that was great. I think Andor is one of the best things Disney has probably done with Star Wars for me. Um, and then House of the Dragon, reviewed that. Think that's fantastic. Think that's also really great. And I think there's just a lot of great options on TV right now, so it's hard to really kind of compete.
Yeah.
And I don't think this show's really up to snuff with some of those other ones. But it's fine. It's got some good qualities in it. It's got some good performances in it. Yeah, so that's just how I feel about it. Yeah, so that was Ring.